Kia ora. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for coming along. My name is Maia, if I haven't met some people in the room yet. I'm the managing director of Aleph Accessibility. We're an accessibility consultancy. We do audits and consulting all around accessibility. And I also run these meetups. Yay. So it's really exciting to have you here. Thanks for joining us. Thanks also to Endgame and Montu for hosting us and this wonderful tech and all that stuff. It's great. I won't get to say too much. We'll just jump right in. For the folks online, feel free to write things in the chat and I'll be monitoring that. Whether Anh is taking questions during the thing or during her talk or after, so I'll leave that up to her. We'll have pizza coming afterwards. That's only for the people in the room, not online. So you can look forward to that as well. Yeah, and the thing is being recorded, so you could look at it afterwards and get all of Anh's handy tips. But I think I'll leave that. Anh and I worked together back at an agency. We did accessibility together, and since then Anh has moved on to do a bunch of really cool UX stuff and incorporating accessibility into that as well. I can let her continue her introduction herself. So let's just give it away. Thanks, Anh.
Kia ora koutou. My name is Anh. It's pronounced similar to the number 1 in German, but not really because I'm Vietnamese. But that's the closest thing I can explain how you can pronounce my name. But also, I'm not fuzzy with how you pronounce my name because you're all not Vietnamese. Cool. So today I'm going to talk about power of web accessibility for non-native English speakers because I'm one myself. It should work. Of course it doesn't work when things happen. Okay, let's try this again. Okay. So this is our table of content today. What I'm going through today, a little bit about me, and then how non-native English speakers are your users, a little bit of common UX design that are not helpful, in my opinion, for non-native English speakers. And there will be a lot of examples and a lot of screenshots for you to see, so you won't get bored out just listening to me talking to a screen full of words. And of course, there will be some tips on how to improve it. So yeah, let's get right into it. So that's me at around 1 year old with very huge scrunchies on my head. My mom was very ambitious. So I was born and raised in Vietnam, and I'm fluent in Vietnamese. I grew up learning English through a lot of American TV show, hence the accent, and cartoon and YouTube. So again, hence the very mixed, you don't really know where it's coming from accent. And I came here as an adult. So before coming to New Zealand, I used to teach English as a second language and to adults. And I worked as interpreters at one point. So translating from Vietnamese to English, all of that spiel. And I kind of over time understand how Vietnamese learn and understanding English, which can be a little bit different from my own experience because a lot of my English was self-taught and it was kind of like ingraining in my journey of growing up. So it was like, since I was 6 years old, I started listening to English. So my experience of learning English myself will be different from someone who's an adult. But again, how we looking at English would be very similar because sometimes we're translating certain words into Vietnamese and vice versa and all of that. But yeah, so when I worked in a lot of like agency and a lot of products, when I bring up the points that, you know, there are non-native English speakers who are a lot of, you know, people out there. You know, they live in New Zealand, they should be able to speak English pretty well. They should be able to use our products pretty well. It should be something that easy to understand. But actually, if you're looking at like the data, just word 0.35 billion people, and non-native English speaker make up like 75% of them. So there's 75% of people who speak English doesn't think and understand English the same way as people who were born and raised with using English in their household, right? And in New Zealand, 91% of like overseas born population were able to speak English, with 59% of them speak non-New Zealand official language. So like half of the people who can speak English also speak another language. So again, like the way that we're interpreting English would be different from someone who was born and raised speaking English as their native tongue. And I just grabbed this data just very recently, by July 2024. We got 600,000 immigrants in New Zealand. And I'm pretty sure you guys, a lot of them, not to say most of them, doesn't have English as their first language. So that's made it very important for us to actually think about those people when we're designing our products and when we creating things, just so that it's easier for them to use, not for us. So let's go through some common UX design that are not helpful. And this is all drawing from my own experience and what I came across and my own struggle, because I love talking about myself. So let's go through forms, which is something that we all have to use, all have to do, and we all love it, right? We love forms so much. We love filling in forms all day, every day. So this is a screenshot I took from a New Zealand Airlines sign-up details, and I'll give you about 5 or 10 seconds to have a read through it. Very common, very something that you see every day, and to think about how would you normally fill in this form. Cool. So here we have different fields in the form where you have title, first name, middle name, family name, preferred name, date of birth. Something very generic, and we all came across something like this before. But I almost missed my flight back home because of this form and because of how it was created. So here is say middle name is optional. So for me, how I understand optional is that if I'm not filling in this field, then it doesn't affect my form submission. It doesn't affect anything, right? It's just an optional field. But I think here what they meant optional is that some people might not have middle names, so you don't have to fill in this field. But the way they put it on the form make me confused and say, okay, I have middle names, but I don't have to put it in. It doesn't affect anything. And then I have a very long conversation at the airport, 4 hours before my flight. That was very stressed. But I was able to board the flight, thank God. But yeah, here you can see that name is something that we use every day, but we don't think about it every day, right? So it's actually being displayed in a very Western-centric composition. And what I mean by that is that even like the word first name is something very Western-centric, because in my culture, it's not like that. So the word first name and last name describe the order of the name based on Western standard, and people cultural background, depending on where you're coming from, determines how their name is actually formed. So for example, like Latin Americans, they might have 2 or more last name, 1 or more from each parent. So if you can think about someone who might have like a hyphen in their names, and when they input their name in the field, it will say, we don't accept special character. Ooh, so how can we deal with that? What if I walk out at the airport and they say, hey, your name doesn't match with your input? That's a big problem, right? Chinese names are displayed with family name first and given names last. So that's the same for my name too. So when I came here, it's really hard for me to say what my name is. And it's something that I do every day. I have to explain to people. So my first name is placed last, my last name is placed first. Here's my paperwork, and I have to show them like 5 different paperworks that show 5 different ways that New Zealand like to present my name. So it's always a very fun conversation for me. So my Vietnamese first name have 2 words instead of 1. And usually people will refer to me using 2 of my first name instead of just 1. But here in New Zealand, I find just using 1 first name is work enough, but it sounds pretty weird for me. Some Native American people have numbers in their names. And again, special characters in names are usually not allowed. And what if these people came across these forms? And some people only have one characters or two characters as their first name. We all came across this example of someone whose last name is Yu, like spell Y-U. And when they enter it, they're like, you need to have 3 or more characters. So form is telling you that you have the wrong name. You should have more than 2 characters in your name. Excuse me. So like, even though this is something that we don't think about it a lot, but now you all have the context about it. I hope that you can keep that in mind in your work because, you know, people, background, culture determine what their names are, not a form. So for example, here is like an old Vietnamese passport and it displays their full name here. You can see this is what is on my passport, just full name. And my last name is first, my first name is last. So again, already a conversation at everywhere I need to do paperwork. Where here in New Zealand, the passport is broken down into, I think this is family name and this is given names. So again, those things can be very confusing. And even before I came to New Zealand, I've never heard of the word given names. So I don't even know what that is. And sorry, just a real example here. With that passport and with other paperwork that I have, my driver license only have surname and no first name. So it's look very dodgy. Same as my friend. And when he got pulled over by the police, they thought he used a fake driver license. So that's also a very uncomfortable conversation that we have to have and keep explaining ourselves every day. So just something that small can create such big impact. So what can we do about it? So here is another more inclusive example from Vietnam Airlines. And of course, because it's Vietnam Airlines, they think about users who are Vietnamese, right? And they would have names like me. So here we have family names and given names. And here is also giving really good instructions, say that it should be as in your passport. What does it look like? Your name ordering. That's actually very helpful. I've never seen any other airlines did it before, but it's very helpful for me, just so that I can have that peace of mind knowing that something showing up on someone else's screen is the same as what the paperwork that I have with me. And also just like other more field that you can have full name on your membership card in local language. So giving them the option just to display and saying that, hey, like culturally, this is how my name is displayed, and this is how I want you to refer me to. Another way is that if you don't have to break it down into different name field like that, can you ask for their full name? And then maybe what should they be called? How should you refer them? Because I know that for some, for people who are working in like email marketing, they might want to cater an email that is very personal and address people with their first name. But you can actually use something like, what should we call you? Have your preferred name. But something like that can also create the personal touch of people receiving the email. And I know that names is a very hard thing because I've worked in government and I know that, just like collecting data and all the back end stuff. And I'm just saying like developers are doing their really great work. But of course, like there is like millions way of how people can write their names, right? So maybe if you already have a forms or fields that already there and you cannot fix it, and I know, I was a designer. I got rejected a lot by developers saying that is really hard and it's harder than you think, and I know that. We can give more instruction for them. So for example, here in an Australia visa application is provide instruction for different names format. So here is explain what family name and given names is. I really appreciate this because I didn't know this term before. And this says like it's very instructive, saying that family name is a name that is shared with the rest of the family. It's really easy to understand, right? You read it and you're like, oh, so this is what it is on my passport. Okay, I use that. And it's also listing out some of the examples of like different culture, like Indian name, Chinese name, Malay names, Western names. So it's giving you again that assurance that what I have on my paperwork would be transferred correctly onto a device or an interface. Okay, next thing. Something very common again, address. We all got shipping from somewhere, from someone, and we all did it before. So how do you understand by address line 2?
not enough characters on line 1.
Yeah, that's exactly what address line 2 is.
Repeat what the person said. Just repeat what.
Oh, yes. So she was saying that address line 2 is when there's not enough characters in the first line, so you fill in it in the second line, right? And for some reason, I feel like it must be like a long time ago when you still writing, and I know that people still writing the address on like a thing, and then you finish line 1, and then cannot spill over, so you write on line 2, and it become digitalized, and then like, how should we call this field? Line 2. So that's very confusing because my address back home is very different. So when I first came here, I want to get something shipped to my place, and I was so confused with this, and I was so scared that I'm gonna lose my package. So this was also very stressful for me. And also things that are simple as like state or regions or suburbs, those are just like the same English word, but being used by different countries. And now you're expecting me, someone who doesn't speak English, to understand all of these bias and nuances and like context and culture and everything. So again, very overwhelming for me. And I was wondering if other people have the same question as me, or am I just dumb? So as a lot of people, I just like Google the term, what is address line 2? And apparently there's a lot of people asking the same question, and they don't understand what address line 2 is. So again, like I said before, address line 2 is just a way to name like a spillover field. It is not a helpful label whatsoever. You think about it, right? What is line 2? What does it mean? And it is widely used with the assumption that everyone has a shared understanding of what's being asked for. You assuming that I was born speaking English and I was filling in like address form like all days, every day. This is the only thing that I'm doing in my life, and I know what it is. But actually, like geographical hierarchy is different for different countries. New Zealand geographical hierarchy doesn't include state. So when I see something like that, how should I fill in it? What should I do? I'm not too sure. So what can we do about it? So provide more detailed instruction where information is expected for the street address field is very helpful. I wouldn't talk much about how they put instruction text in like the place for the text. I think this is a bad example on how you put instruction text, because as soon as you input the field, everything disappeared. But the instruction text is very helpful. So street and number, so immediately you know what to fill in there, right? If you live in an apartment, how you fill it in, unit, building, floor, whatever. So whatever information you have, you can fill it in. So again, very instructive. And also, here's a state, province, and region. It's the same thing. So it's very easy for me to understand what they're asking for, because those 3 words are the same thing. And a lot of these related to WCAG, and we love WCAG. So if you don't know what WCAG is short for Web Content Accessibility Guideline, and this is huge rules books about how cool accessibility is and how to make things more accessible on the web. So I swallowed that whole book just to give you guys 2 examples here of how it's related to everything I just said before. So it's related to success criteria 3.3.2. labels or instruction. So it's saying that label and instruction need to be provided when content requires user input. So this means when you asking user to input something, you need to tell them what you're asking for. And also related to 2.4.6 heading labels, which saying that headings and label describe the topic or the purpose. So you have to be instructive and descriptive of your labels and instructions so that people know how to fill it in. The first thing is what to fill in, and the second thing is how can they fill it in correctly and not being stressed out all the time. The next things that I want to talk about is about UX writings. And one of the first things that I've learned in English is synonyms and acronyms. So let's talk about that. So how do you understand this question from this test? So the test say, which of these standards is absolutely essential for accessibility? And there's 3 options: level A and AA, or level A, AA, and AAA. So if you are not familiar with WCAG, the way that it works is that you're kind of being that your website will be audited based on these levels of accessibilities. And the more A's you have, the higher accessibilities you have, just to make it simple. And here is asking me this question. It's actually from an accessibility course. So yeah, I didn't get it right. And I was trying, I think at this point I was asking Maya, I was like, am I not good at doing accessibility, or is this question confusing? I'm a bit unsure. And I was really thinking, I was like, am I not good? Because I've been working in this and I'm taking this test and I failed. And I think just the use of the word absolutely would describe something like at the max, and essential would describe something at like the min. In the same sentence, it's very confusing for me, and my head and how I translate it in the back of my head doesn't make sense. I feel like in this context, using essential is good enough. So essential is already mean absolutely necessary. So if you're replacing that into that sentence, they're asking which of these standards is absolutely necessary for accessibility. And again, it's just a very bad question in general. And I was really confused of what they're asking for, because in my opinion, you should always aim for higher, not aim for like the lowest here and just meet there and then that's enough and then good. Yeah. Another thing. Let's look at this form. So now I've talked a lot about how I think about English and how people who are non-native English speakers think about English. Have a look at this form. I hope you can all read it. Good enough. And just spend some time and think about which words can be confusing for English as a second language user on the screen. And just say it as soon as you have something come up in mind.
Overseas, maybe?
Huh?
Overseas?
Overseas? What do you think overseas is something that can be
You don't necessarily need to cross the sea to go to another country.
true?
For me, it's about the period of number of days. I've had the same difficulty when I was filling out my applications. Just some days it's getting like almost at any time. At any time, it's a period of some days. At any one time. There's just so many.
Yeah, it was confusing.
Yeah, it's very confusing. I don't know how to interpret it. Is it like together in one time or on the whole for the last 5 years?
Yeah. I get what you mean. Yeah.
I'm just FYI for this is the mic to make sure that people back in online can hear. It's not going to amplify in the room itself. But yeah, no, it's okay. I forgot as well. So please feel free to like voice up and stuff, and I'll just like run around and give you the things that people online can hear. Okay, carry on.
Yeah, I've had the same problem. I think if it says 4 days to 5 years period, that will make more sort of be more clearer. A period of 4 days to 5 years.
Yeah.
Rather than
So you reckon like any like all those like the very big chunks of words in the middle, like you don't really need it. At least just tell me if I stay somewhere 4 days up to 5 years, that's good enough. Yeah.
overseas, yeah.
Yeah. Anyone have any other ideas?
So this is not just for ESL, but that bottom bit of countries visited in the past 5 years. So first of all, you had a first question of, have you traveled anywhere else over the first 5 years? So that would already be a Boolean question, right? So yes and no. And then under there, what if you did say no to the last 5 years? Like, but I'm still have to list the country. Like, what is this about? Like, can't there be one question? Just skip the first one and go straight to countries visited in the past 5 years. Like, isn't that going to answer the same thing?
True. We have a lot of 5 years on this. I love it.
If I can add, I think that it's confusing that it says last 5 years and past 5 years as if they're two different things. It would make me wonder, like, is it different?
Actually, I encountered this type of phone before, and what confused me a lot is like duration of stay. For example, they have days, but thinking about you take a flight from middle of day, then you go to another country, spend a half day in another country. Does that count as half a day or counting that as days?
Yeah.
You know, is it days to enter a country or is it day you live in front of the country?
True.
Yeah.
That's a really good point. Yeah. And like, what if you like only stay there for like half a day? Do you put like 0.5 in there? It's like, how do you, and then there's a no decimal and you're like, oh, what do you do? This is really confusing. We were just agreeing that it's not a really great form. We don't love it, right? And beside of like what everyone was saying, and it was so cool to hear what everyone was saying, because the first thing that got me confusing was the word visit and stay. Because I think though are two different words. It's being used like interchangeably, and the term stay seems very ambiguous. Like, what does stay mean? Like, if you take a flight, are you staying there? You're laying over there, and or do you have to go to a hotel and then you stay there? And then what if you're on a vacation? And then it's just all very like confusing of like what they're asking for, and also why do you have to use two different words for the same thing? That's just like my main question. Why? So again, like for me, when I'm reading English, sometimes I need to refer back to like words that are the same to understand if, the first sentence, they're talking about the same thing as the second sentence. So here, I would highly recommend, if you can, please be consistent with your terminology, unless you like really need to change it up and switch it up to make it really cool. But otherwise, I don't think there's a good use for that. And when I study English, I usually go to thesaurus.com. If you know what that website is about, they're showing you all the synonyms and acronyms of a word, and actually look it up and see what if visit and stay is the same word. And apparently, visit does mean stay, but stay doesn't mean visit. So that's not helpful. I still don't know how to fill in that form to this day. And yeah, as you're saying, like, does transiting as an airport considering staying in a country? Because literally you're like stepping your foot in their land, but then you're flying away 2 hours later. Should I declare all of my transiting places I've been to? So it's all just very confusing, right? If it takes me like more than half an hour to think about what to fill in the form, it's not that great. Another thing that I love is tenses, because that's something that I don't have in my language. So again, with the same test that I took, this is the question of being asked. Have a moment to look at this question and just think about what can be the expected answer. So if you have to answer this question, how would you answer it?
Can you read it out loud?
Yes. So the question is, how might you explain the problem of poor accessibility caused by your third-party content to your team, since the cost of replacing or rewriting it can make cost debate?
Yeah. Good point, so what is it of a catch?
How would you understand it? Anyone have any thing in mind?
Two parts, and then Google the parts.
I'll have to break it down into parts, the
Yeah.
sentence into parts, and then Google each of them separately, and then make sense.
Yes, I would do that too. Yes, I get what you mean. Anyone have any other ideas of how they might answer this question? Have anyone asked you this in life, just casually, in the bathroom when you're washing your hands? No? Yes, because it's just a very compound sentence, right? And it's made the question sounds like it's already been answered for me. Because if there's like two phrases, like how might you explain the problem of poor accessibility caused by your third-party content, and then comma since. And then for me, since is like because. And then because it's like, oh, you're already explaining why is a problem before, and now you're making me answer this question again. So that's how I interpret it in my head, and I still don't understand what they're asking for. So if I had to rewrite this question, I would rephrase it a little bit different. So like what you said, I probably would just break it down. Like just, I know that like plain language and making like a sentence more concise would be better. But in this situation, having really compound and huge sentence doesn't help at all. So here, creating like giving some context for your reader. So I think here the problem is that your company is having a third-party vendor to develop your software. That's the context. And the cost of replacing or rewriting the current software might cause debate. As an accessibility advocate, how might you explain and give suggestion to your team about the risk of poor accessibility caused by using a software from a third-party vendor? So that would be how I rephrasing it again. And I know that I'm not a content writer, so I'm not going to be like super great about it, but at least I'm trying to break it down into like little smaller chunks so that people can digest it just like little by little, and giving them more context of understanding of like, oh, what am I asking for? Not just squishing everything into one sentence and using big words and everything and make it so hard for you to understand. And another form, because again, we love forms. So here's the context for you guys. And just imagine you're a user and you're filling in this form. You're applying for an endorsement and they're asking you for your license status. How should you understand this form? What do you need to do? Or what can be confusing for you? Any thoughts or idea about this? So here is the drop down, and this on the upper picture is being closed and this is being expanded, and there's two options. So the two option is I have a current license, and the second option is I am currently applying for a license. I can see Prey face a question. I'm loving it. Yeah, so exactly, like when we read this, we just like, oh, what is being asked for, and this look very frustrating. Can you tell me why it's frustrated you? Because you look frustrated, or is your happy face? I don't know. You can tell me.
Sure.
Yes, I have a disappointment as my happy face. So, first of all, regardless of second language or not, in any form that has only two options, why are you using a drop down in the first place? So this frustrates the hell out of me anyway. But the thing is, like, so the form is asking for some sort of license status. And so kind of just say my license is current and it's not, or like, is it new? Like what like you're asking for my status and you then saying I'm currently applying for a license.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
it's like, what is this? Is there another license of this thing that I didn't know about? Like, can we make those options simpler? It's like license status, active or inactive. Like something you can simplify that way more.
Yeah, exactly. So what happened here is that, again, when I study English, I had to study a lot about the tenses. I don't think a lot of people who have English as a first language would think about this as much as me, because I have to go like, oh, is it a simple tense? Yeah, or is a present continuous, and then present perfect, and then present perfect continuous, and then this is why like running in the back of my head all the time when I'm talking to people. But like native speakers just like la 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 talking, everyone understand, and then I'm over here just like overthinking of how I describe just a situation. So here, just like the use of their tenses is just hard to understand. They use present continuous, which something for me means the action is not completed. It means that you're in the middle of doing it. You are doing it. So this means that when I'm doing this form, I'm also like, on the other hand, just like applying for a license, something like that. Are they asking me to do it? Or also the tenses in the drop downs option and the tenses in the instruction text don't match. like one doesn't reference the other. And I was saying, as like a non-native English speaker, I usually just reference the same words just to make sure I'm understanding the right thing. But here at the top, the instruction text, they say you must have applied, but here is say I have a current. So is it the same thing? Should I have a what exactly? So I don't have to select this still. So yes, I like as other people who have English as a second language, I don't have like a natural tie with words or the way that native speaker do. And this is very similar to the deaf community too, because a lot of them consider themselves to be part of a unique cultural and linguistic minority who use sign language as their primary language. So even though they can read and write in English, their primary language is sign language, not English. You can understand what I mean? So some people would identify themselves as that, and writing good English also benefit the deaf community too. And not every language has tenses. So in Vietnamese, it's very simple. Something happened in the past, something happened now, and something happened in the future. And that's it. There's no in between. You know, I don't understand, like maybe in English, they're more diverse universe. That's why you have Marvel and all of that. So exactly, this not every language will translate with each other easily. And compound sentences are very tricky and require more time to understand. And yeah, I would break things down like her just to understand what each part is asking me for. And referencing and repeating the same words would really help reduce the cognitive load of like me just reading something and understanding something, and using synonyms or this or that to refer to things is very confusing, because what are you talking about? Just like point it and use that word and use it for me. So let's talk about some tips, some more tips to improve UX for English as a second language users. Use plain English and keep your English simple. I know you guys are all really smart and everyone's really smart and you can write really cool English sentence, but for forms and things that are important, just make it simple. Just make sure that people know what they are filling in the forms. You can use readability testing tools or ask for user feedback to see how hard content is to read. I know there can be a bias if you are like a native English speaker and you think that something read well and understandable, but maybe give it to your colleagues who is not a native English speaker and see how they think and how they understand it. And as you can tell, like from my question previously in on the slide, there's already like 4 people pointing out like 10 things that would confuse them in the form already. So I know there might be a bias as a native speaker, so maybe just ask your colleague. That is like the easiest thing you can do. And plain English is more accessible to a wider range of people who have cognitive disability, who are English native speakers but have low literacy. They find it's really hard to read. People who are digitally excluded, they might have like digital skills, for example, like elder people, elderly, of course, and the deaf or hard of hearing community. So a lot of people were thinking that, you know, since people have hard of hearings, they must read really well. But it's not the same. Like using sign language and using read and writing language is 2 different things. Also neurodivergent and specifically autistic people who have autism would benefit from plain English a lot. Yeah, so have a read at something, have a read at plain English, how to apply it. Also, there's an easy read guideline in the slides I put in the Zoom call, but also Maya gonna send it out for you guys. You can click on that link and have a look. It's developed in New Zealand and it's free and everyone can look at it and understand how to use it. Also, something that can be very helpful is adding visual cues and extra support like tooltips. You can use color and icons to pair with text, just making it easier. Something that looks a bit more universal can really help giving cues for users. Providing screenshot and instruction is something that's super helpful. If you see all of like the IT help desk or when I usually Google on how to install something, you see a screenshot of like, do this, do that, and I don't even need to read anything. I look at the screenshot and I follow. So that's the easiest thing for me. And I know that a lot of people will say, if it's word designed correctly, you don't need the tooltips, which is right for like, again, English native speaker, but for non-native speaker like us, like some unobtrusive explanation next to key action can really help us get to finish a task. And even though it's like a kind of like a hand-holding experience and you helping them walking through things, is provide a sense of clarity, you know, and not making me feel stressing out of missing a flight. And just like giving them the comfort of being like, yes, you're doing the right thing. Next step, you're doing the right thing. So just confirming with me, I'm doing the right thing, and not make me confusing and stressing out in my day-to-day life. And of course, when your user are familiar with your UI and they've been using this for a long time, then they can just ignore the tooltips and whatever you provided. But it's really good for user who experience your UI for the first time. But it's also must be keyboard accessible. So also remember that. So tooltips, just for those who don't understand what tooltip is, it's usually this little icon like the eye or like the question mark next to UI, just to explain how you can use things. But these needs to be keyboard accessible, and which means they can be triggered by using keyboard like enter or also mouse click, rather than you hover over and then you see something pop up and then you hover out, it's disappeared. This is because people who have more disability and if they're using keyboard at their main way of navigating the web, they would find it really hard just to hover through something. Again, this is something that to ensure that it's accessible for both user who have more disability, but also user who have English as a second language. And if it's part of a form, it's get really technical and geeky. You can use area described by to connect the help text to the form field, just to make sure that when you enter that form field, it will relate it to the tooltip that you provided, just to create the relationship between the tooltips and what is being instructed. So something like this is very helpful. Like this is how immigration is even describing how you can provide your passport photos. So literally very simple, just saying something, just an image saying is acceptable, an image saying is incorrect, unacceptable, not good, cannot use. You cannot provide a picture of a picture or a picture from another document. So when I look at this, I'm like, okay, cool, I know what to do. Instead of reading all of this, eyes must be clearly visible and open, mouth closed, no smiling. So just imagine if you're taking a picture and you have to like read all of that and then remember, okay, what do I need to do? Smile, okay, not smiling, and then all of that. But this, again, very helpful, easy to understand. And I feel like we can all agree that this is way easier to understand than that, right? Even though it's saying the same thing. User testing and feedbacks, always good, right? Always advocating for user testing and feedback, and including ESL user in your research, just like testing with user with disability needs. You can also ask them if English is their first or second language, or even their third language, and also ask for their opinions about how they read things, how they understand things. And yeah, just ask someone you know, tap someone who's sitting next to you and be like, can you help me read this, and how this reads for you? How do you understand it? Is it hard to understand? And their best position not to assume that there's always a shared understanding, because that's what the problem is. That's when people who use English as their first language assume that everyone else understands the same thing as they are. So I think just always, you know, checking in with someone and asking for someone's opinion, always helpful, just to give you a different perspective on how you use words. And words could have more than one meaning, and they might require more clarification. So I've talked a lot here, and I'm gonna keep talking, but this is gonna be my last talking point, I promise, before you get to pizza. You can all see the pizza, I know. So let's wrapping this up. Just about this whole talk is about how culture shapes the way people learn and use languages. Already you've heard people saying they would Google and breaking things down just to understand one sentence. That's how we learn and use English and use it in our language every day. I go up and looking up what synonyms and antonyms, acronyms is, because that's how I learn and use English, just to make sure that I'm correct. So it's important to get user feedback rather than assume a shared understanding. Plain English make content more accessible and relatable to a broader audience. It's helpful for so many people, deaf communities, people with cognitive disability, people who might have a concussion and they find it really hard to read something. So just something like that can help a lot of people, and small thing can make a huge impact. Whether or not I get to fly back home is really depending on that form over there. So I'm just saying, huge impact on what you're doing. And there's actually no universal design solution for non-native speakers, because cultural influences, the mental models, how we're using language and context is very crucial. So again, advocating for UX research and testing, and talking to diverse user can help you create like fair design and making sure that everyone kind of have the same understanding about things. And accessibility just benefits everyone. You know, just using plain English is not just good content writing, it's good accessibility, and is contributing to making your product more accessible for people. And it's time for Q&A. So now it's time for you to talk and not me talking much. Or, I mean, I'm still answering, not that time, but you get to talk now.
Stop. Yeah, that was super interesting and lots of takeaways. Let's do Q&A. I know there's pizza, but like, I'm sure you also have questions as well. So we'll do again with the mic, and I'll just pass it around. As well as for people online, feel free to write your questions in, and I'll jump back and forth, or Joe will help. We'll jump back and forth between in the room and online as well. All right, yeah. And maybe if you want to say your name as well, and we can start to know each other as well.
Sorry, I feel like I've been talking a lot as well. I work as a UX UI designer at Ministry of Education, and that's why I've got a lot more interest in this topic. And since we are designing for equally non-native English speakers, I've been personally struggling with the content that still needs to communicate some jargons, you know, some wordings that would have to be translated into official forms and very specific to a support request or something like that. But it should reach the public equally. Yeah. They should understand what they need to fill in, because it's their personal information that they're providing us.
Yeah.
So how would you deal with situations like that? How do you make sure that the meaning is communicated, but they're also familiar with the name of the terms?
Yeah. So I think for something like, very specific terms that the user, you kind of want the user to learn and understand it properly, and also be familiar with it over time, right? Because I think in your case, probably like they're gonna go back and using that term for other things. So again, something like tooltips can be really helpful. So you're explaining what that word is, or even like before they starting a form, just declaring like what this term actually means. If you have like a really good documentation or like a website you can link them to, you can also do that. But I'm aware that if you're clicking off to like another page, it might obstruct their whole user flow and everything. So I'm not absolutely recommending that, but it can be like a quick fix if you do have something that's handy. Also just instruction, just maybe provide something at the top, or just instruction text at the bottom of the form field, just telling them what this means, or just like a side note or tooltips. Usually it's really helpful.
Thank you so much, but I don't mean to challenge you a lot here. The main struggle is that when we user tested, they barely read the instructions. They were like, okay, it's a form, I need to get it filled. And they don't go back to read what is required from them. So how do you kind of deal with those cases?
I think it also probably would be related to how you presented that instruction too, right? If we making it really prominent and like really in their face with like a whole box outside saying this is really important, read it, I think that can be something to accommodate. But also you can do some sort of like A/B testing for certain things like that to see which UI might land better at such instruction. it's really depending on like how long your instruction is, right? And like how they use it. And of course they will like keep going back and forth and being like, I still understand how to use it. And you're just like, it's right there. How can you not see? I understand what you're saying. So again, maybe testing out how can you make that design a bit more prominent if it's like absolutely like crucial for user. It can also be like just breaking down the forms into like different pages. So that, okay, if you finish this section, moving on to the next, before you beginning this next section, hear what you need to know and read this, and then you can continue. So just like getting them having like a break of feeling informed, because we're all filling in 20 pages form. We understand how that feels. So yeah.
Well, thank you so much.
That would be my
That's
recommendation.
I don't have an answer to this, and I don't know if anyone does. So I know in recent years, government aside, we have been pushing hard on making sure that Te Reo Māori is surfaced and used in everyday life. The problem as a second or a third language speaker of English is sometimes, understandably, Te Reo Māori is just take over. Like it's a main text of the page or a design or an ad. And I get where they're coming from. They want to give permanent prominence, long overdue respect. But at the same time, as a migrant, this is very hard.
Yes.
What on earth does this mean?
Yes.
And often that same level of support is not given to us as we either filling in form or trying to interpret some of those information.
Yeah.
How have you, like, do you have a good example as to how that is done in a respectful and useful way?
Well, I think it's actually, yes, it is a very tough thing to, yeah, but I've seen where, I'm not too sure, maybe not in ads, but like in certain documentation, they would translate the Te Reo Māori word in English, and I find it really helpful, and it's making me more interested in Te Reo Māori and understanding why they use it, in what context. And of course, I was thinking about, it's like a shower of thoughts also. I was like, because I've been here for like 5 or 6 years, and I've kind of got the context of like people saying kia ora as like a hello, and beginning an email with it. And I'm still to this day sometimes unsure if I should use certain terms in Te Reo Māori at work, and only through work that I get to be able to use Te Reo Māori more. So yes, I was thinking about it a lot. So yeah, if possible, you can translate that into English, just like not making it prominent. Like we all know that we should know this word in Te Reo Māori, but also like just putting that terms at the bottom can be helpful. But maybe what they're trying to achieve is that for us to be more curious and searching it up, because if we're curious enough, we're searching it up and we're trying to understand what it means. So it can be that, but it can also just go through our head just like that, right? Yeah. No, good question. Thank you. I hope it was an okay answer.
I was just thinking on that maybe one solution or kind of aid can be styling the Te Reo and English slightly differently, so that because they're both Latin characters, and this is, I mean, I'm a native English speaker, so you can answer this for me, that I wonder if the confusion could be that it's all Latin characters. So when somebody looks at it, they can be expecting to be reading English maybe. And so one way to kind of give a cue that this is different is by styling it differently.
Yeah.
Someone online? Yeah.
On you can English translation in brackets just after the Te Reo word from Ashwini online.
Yeah. And I've seen website being developed with like both language at the same time, and like not with the language toggle, but like was actually like both content displayed next to each other the same time. So that's also work, but it's also a lot of work to do that. But you understand that too. Yeah, this is really good. Yeah, I have a Kiwi friend who didn't know that kumara is like a Māori word until recently, when she talked to her Japanese grandma and was like, what's kumara? Yeah.
And then again online, Ashwini says that our website has tooltips for the Te Reo words.
Yeah, like something like a little like underline where you can click on and you can see like the direct translation of the word. That would be helpful too.
Would it be a good practice to, we're talking about phone, because it's very important information provided by the user. Would it be just possible to translate the phone, the label, the instruction into the target language? It was being inspired by, the passenger arrival card. Previously, they're like physical card. I understand that different language when you go into New Zealand border. But last year, I think there's a new app called NZ Traveler Declaration. And I think at that time, they only provide English and Te Reo Māori. And I just checked, they now provide Chinese. So, but previously they have like physical card and the physical card writing multiple different language, and that would be very convenient. So my question is that for like detailed design, especially for the phone, is that a good practice to particularly retranslate that phone into a different language?
I think so. First of all, with like direct translation, the hardest thing is just to make sure that it's translated right and correctly, and not just some Google Translate toggle and then you read the whole thing and you don't know what they're talking about sometimes. Because it doesn't translate what I'm Vietnamese. I'm just saying. I just like what you're talking about. But also like yes, achieving that would be like the best solution, I would say, if you can have someone who like an interpreter or someone who look at the content and like have a direction that for the form is really good, and like actually like relating to what you're saying, like based on my experience working with like the Chinese communities and even the Vietnamese communities, and also Pacifica communities, they sometimes refuse to read English, just like anything. If they speak English, they just like skip. They just don't want to read unless like you put a knife right there, like you have to read it, and they'll read it. Or else it would like the first thing that we ask, that we're being asked whenever we present some prototype, is that they ask, does it available in my language? Can this become Chinese? Can we, is it in Tamil? Like that's the first question that they're asking for. So if you can aim for that, that would be super awesome. But it's just like, I know the barrier is just to developing that, and also just to making sure that everything is interpreting correctly and also updated correctly. So I think that's like the main problem. But if it's a form that doesn't get updated that often, for example, something like passenger arrival card for New Zealand, and you kind of like using that over time, then maybe investing in something like that would be super helpful. Yeah.
I just want to rain on people's parade on that as well. Context, I'm a software developer, but I've also worked in a project where there's 11, 12 translations on that website alone. And in case you haven't worked on these projects before, in order for them to be efficient and effective, there have to be some sort of in-house teams that focus purely on translation those strings. So that's from the content management perspective. Depending on the size of your website, that could be a team of 10 people per language. If it's a smaller site, then it might be 1 or 2 lone person just to do QA checks with each other. So that's just content management alone, from translating, creating those things. The layer of maintaining that as a developer, there are now SaaS, software as a service solutions out there that does help you do those string management. So you can manage, okay, cool, create this one data of, I don't know, submit or send. It translates like this in Thai and English in Te Reo Māori. Those are available, but they cost, and not all organizations know to access those things or have the budget to access it. Most in-house solutions either don't have an ability for people to easily add those translation in, or it costs, whatever cost it is, it would double, triple the cost of managing alone. So as much as I would love translations to be everywhere, I think like what Anh said about things, if it's a critical flow then yes, you can do limited time investment on that critical flow. But it's very hard to ask for a whole site and a whole content to be translating this way because it's a huge investment that should be made upfront from a technological standpoint, as well as just business strategy and content standpoint.
I was actually just talking to Maya about the translation thing before this session. I think you're really right. Like I work in marketing and our website are translated to just 6 and 7 languages, and it costs a lot. And whenever if like for us, we do overseas international fairs, if we are developing a form for that fair, we need to consider what is the return on investment. If you invest a lot in the development of those forms and getting them translated, will you get the traffic overseas to those fairs to justify you spending so much money before that? So I think there's another layer to that we need to consider. So just to add to that question. And I actually, for that New Zealand Traveller Declaration, before they launch, we had a meeting with them, and I did ask the same question: are you guys going to translate these into different languages? They said kind of resourcing and money investment, that kind of thing. I'm guessing they would still roll it out, but it'll take a bit of time. Yeah.
So, is there anything online? Joe, do you mind checking if there's anything else online? Cool. I think on the translation, which just to kind of lift it a little bit and bring it back to Ein's, I'm talking in front of the camera to be able to see, is I think that's the whole idea of getting it in from the beginning, which is similar to what accessibility is all about, getting it in from the beginning and using the tips that you have so that you don't have to translate it, like take the whole paragraph and translate sentence by sentence, that it's clear enough that, you know, you have a basic level of English that you can make sense of it, and it's written in a way that has, you know, people in mind who aren't fluent and native to the language.
And just to add on to that, like if you write like in plainer English, if the user don't understand it, they can use Google Translate into their own language. It just translates better and like easier to understand rather than use some really fancy words. So also adding on to that, if like, you know, you allow the user to translate it themselves just better than use plain English.
Yeah. Cool. Awesome. Thanks again to Anh for that really quick presentation.
That's me. You can reach out to me.